The agenda is not immutable. It's not hard and fast, and so we can make a few adjustments. Our feature presentation is James Lee. He's going to deal with the conspiracy theory and Q&A, but the first thing I like to do is maybe pause for about 30 seconds and send a special meditation or prayer out for Ruth Ginsburg and that her destination home to the ancestors and to the source will be okay. So let's take about 30 minutes to give a shout out to Justice Ginsburg. And if anybody has further comments, they'll certainly be appropriate at this time. Okay, I'm in Shay. One of the things that I want to say is probably a little sacrilegious, is that I was hoping that she could wait until after the election.
I think we were all hoping that.
Let me elevate my sound. I don't have enough sound, and so I'm gonna have to do something to advance my sound. But if everybody can hear me well, I'm gonna keep talking. So this first part of the agenda, we don't have any new members on yet. We've had a few of our members who've been missing to come back, David and Randall. And matter of fact, we would like to find out from David how Evita is doing, but we can do that, Eviva, at some other point. I wanted to also say, Bob, before it's over, you might can give us a preview like you did last time, or what it is that we can expect from the storm. But I'd like to do that at the end of the meeting. Wendy, I see that you are here, and that excellent voter mobilization video that you sent us, you allowed us to use last time with Bun B. We want to thank you for that.
Thank you. I hope people spread it out further. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm doing some funny things with my screens, but I do want to thank Miss Brandley for being so good about cooperating with some of us. I'm gonna answer for myself. I'm kind of like a fossil with some of this stuff. But that first series of points that we have up, this actually came to me from the United States Post Office in a card that I got at home. So let's collectively look at that and see if anybody has any comments about what it is that we have there from the Post Office.
Yeah, I got that.
Well, I'm wondering how many people already got a notice to request an absentee ballot or a mail-in ballot. I did.
Yeah, I did too.
We did too.
Yeah.
And I did not, but I already had requested one, so maybe they didn't put me on the list.
Yeah. That was my situation as well.
Continuation.
I will say this, just in the good news department, I was out mowing the lawn this morning as my only exercise is a push mower. And a young lady came by and she handing out literature for the local Democratic Party candidate, wearing a Trust Black Women t-shirt. And so I was glad to see somebody out and about going door to door. And I thanked her for that. Told her she already had my vote.
Yeah.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad you made a comment about the Trust Black Women t-shirt. The surge by Black women is expected to be tantamount or equivalent to the surge that Barack Obama got. And so that is a real good sign, but we know that the critical thing is that you have to win in the right places.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the things that I have been ruminating about in my head is that this uncertainty that is being forecast is going to throw the country into a quandary. It might not happen if you get a few key states in the electoral column, particularly with Florida and North Carolina. So a lot of the mystery goes away if by 11 o'clock on election night, the tallies are in for Florida and North Carolina, and it can't hurt the fact that Bloomberg has moved $100 million into the market for Joe Biden in Florida. Okay.
Not enough. He has so much money.
Okay.
100 million is, he has $50 billion, so I have to think about it every time I do the math.
Okay.
10% would be 5 billion. 1% of his net worth would be 500 million. So he's giving 0.2% of his net worth. So just if you want to put that into, if you were so fortunate as to have a net worth of $500,000, that would be like 1% would be would that be like giving $1,000 if you had a net worth of $500,000? It's not very much money for him. He should be giving a lot more, but it ain't mine to give, so.
Well, David, I guess Bloomberg is, if he heard your comments, he's going to say that's one of the people out there that's very good at spending other people's money.
I am very good at spending his money, and he should ask my opinion more often, because I have several opinions on where he could be spending his money. In addition to Florida, I'm glad he went there. That's good.
Okay.
But I'd like some in Texas.
Yeah. Yeah, I do notice that our friend from El Paso that was a presidential candidate.
Beto.
Yeah, the Beto is actually pretty active in trying to support certain type of down ballot races and also the presidency race, which is going to move us to the down ballot race between Lizzie Fletcher and Wesley. Let's see, I think Wesley Hunt. So Wesley Hunt, well, first let me tell you where the district is, because I'm always driving through the district and we do know some people in the district. But if you, let's say, got on the Southwest Freeway and you exited Buffalo Speedway or Kirby, but especially Buffalo Speedway, and you started driving west.
Right.
On Buffalo Speedway, West University, Headwood Village, Bel Air, and all of those communities would be in that district. And Lizzie Fletcher, she did, as a matter of fact, Hillary Clinton carried that district by about 5 or 6 points. But Wesley Hunt, if you notice his message is basically slavery message. You know, in other words, I'm saying my ancestors were in slavery 5 generations ago. And now I've gone to West Point and he has some chains and shackles that he's opened up, that they are off. And so he's trying to position himself as a Trump supporter who has profited and represent a group of people who profited from those policies. So those of you who know people in that West University area, my little girl, my youngest little girl went to school at that West University Elementary. So anyway, all of us know people in and around West University, and I think it goes all the way back to 610 at Bel Air. But at any rate,
it includes the energy corridor.
okay, it includes the energy corridor.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it also, I'm not sure if it has a medical center in it, but it certainly includes Meyerland and Westbury.
Yes, it includes the memorial.
Nancy and I are both in that district.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, now that I know where you live, I can see you being in that district. The candidate that Lizzie Fletcher defeated, as I can remember, was a person who was not friendly to DACA at all.
Oh.
And so Lizzie Fletcher is friendlier to the DACA folk that they're trying to send back to these war-torn zones. But anyway, don't want to deal with that. We can talk with that off the record. But I think that one of the future projects, if we have future projects, what are the criteria that we use to vet a candidate? What do we look for in criteria, and how do we get that awareness out to the community? Do you think that would be a valid quest that we can do if we decide to go forward after the election?
I do, and I'd like to also recommend that event coming up that Dr. Jean Ladding has with Unity Church, which they're going to be talking about down ballot strategies and, you know, how to deal with those. And I think that's coming up next weekend.
Yeah.
The Zoom deal. I think we sent it out before.
Yeah. And so look, I want to reinforce the down ballot strategies. Anything is possible at this particular juncture, because we know in New York City that a 28-year-old gay Black man ran against a 10-term, I think what I'm going to say, a 10-term committee head in Congress. I think his district was pretty near Ocasio-Cortez district, and he had her support. I think his name was Jamie, but at any rate, he defeated her, and he had been a local. He defeated him, and he had been a local activist. So I'm just trying to point out that we're in a time where a lot of different things can happen.
I think he was a teacher too.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
He speaks very well.
He does. He really does. Now,
Can't remember his name, but I know what you mean.
yeah, Ms. Brandley, can you bring up that flow chart and that tool, GOTV food tool? I think I sent it to you in a. Ms. Stevens, how you doing? Okay.
Doing good this morning. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, good morning. Yeah, good to have you. So, Charlotte, how you doing?
I'm good.
Okay, good. And so what we wanted to do is that we wanted to look at, David has suggested that we come up with an electronic, a phone tree. We did come up with the phone tree, and some of you had the wisdom to make some revisions to the phone tree. Anyway, Ms. Brandley is trying to bring up that phone tree right now. I want to encourage people that if you want to use the chat box, you're welcome to use the chat box, because sometimes people will say that it's distracting for so many people in the chat box, but if nobody says that, we will use the chat box. Okay, yeah, there it is. So this writing is a little bit too tiny for me. So Cheryl, would you take us through that?
Okay, it's basically the same principle. The main change is we allowed a place to fill in important dates and deadlines like voter registration deadline, vote by mail, blah, 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 just so that the caller has that at their fingertips. They don't have to look for it if somebody asks a question. The other thing is, the only other really big change is we made the form, and maybe it's too small. I mean, if somebody wants to, I sent the original, if somebody wants to, you know, modify it, we can send that. That it's just an Excel spreadsheet, but you can do 10 names if you scroll down. Instead of having just one form for each person that you call, you can put all the information on one for 10 people. And then of course, if you want to do more than 10, that's great. And you can share it with others, whatever. The only other change is the other question at the end is, will that person that you call agree to call 10 other people?
Yeah. So David, since you were the agitator for this, you have any comments?
I like the additional question. I know that. So my eyes are also not as good as they once were, and I tend to believe all forms should have a lot of space. And this one, at least in the version online, looks fine from that perspective. I guess my real question is, what's the mechanism of getting this used? So there are two different groups that seem important to me. One of them is young people, and they will be better reached, I think, electronically than by telephone in this way. But the other group that I would be thinking about would be if we can get some assistance through some of the churches. They can't, at least in theory, they're not supposed to speak from the pulpit, but in practice, they can allow people to have access to their lists. And if some of the ministers are going to be willing to allow that, then working through church lists might be, people respond better if they know who's calling them. If I call people and they say, "Who are you?" it's not going to be particularly effective. So I'm wondering whether there's a way to leverage this to help get some of the churches to either get people out on the day or get people to do the absentee ballots.
Well, David,
ideally, if we're going to use church lists, we'd also be using members of those churches to do the calling.
Agree.
Yeah. So let me say this, that we have a very effective and I think a deep penetration with the United Methodists. I would say the Black United Methodist churches, because we're working through a Black United Methodist coalition. And so the leading person in that coalition was committed to distributing this form and then to certain leaders and then make sure that they use this form, but they are a highly mobilized and voting population. Just let me indicate that David was talking about, how do you get this before the membership? just as a little comedy, but when I was running for election and I asked the deacon if I could speak from the pulpit, not from the floor, and he said, yeah, if you write another check. He said the size of your check. But anyway, this is just, yeah.
So you called your friend Michael, huh? And he contributed so you could speak for a long time?
I wish I
That's
could.
another thing he could.
I wish I could have gotten the Bloomberg. Yes, indeed. Yeah, and we're going to talk sometime when in light moments about some Bloomberg stories and some other stories in terms of his effort to get off the ground here in Houston. But we'll do that another time. But look, I think that we have something, especially when you say, well, you commit to call 10 or more people. So we wanted family members, churches, community-based organizations, to use this form or some other kind of form. I know the Democratic Party is making an incredible outreach because a lot of people have been contacted by text, and they're supposed to text back whether or not you're going to do the same thing that we're proposing here. So there are a lot of different outreaches going. I sent this to the Bureau of Youth and Adolescent Health, and I talked to some of the leaders of those divisions. And so we're trying to make sure that we can get the millennials and those young people that's involved with police reform to get involved in this GOT effort. But I think that David is a wonderful suggestion, and I think we're off to a start. And so we'll put this in our archives because we might have to use it again. So we have no further questions. I see that Ms. Tolu came on. She is our global health specialist. And Ms. Tolu, it's good to see you this morning. You're looking like a teenager, as I always tell you. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. So glad to be here.
Yeah, so with your epidemiological background, you're going to talk to us about herd immunity. What is it?
Great. Thank you again for the opportunity to share with the group. So what herd immunity is an instance or situation where a certain percentage of the population have reached or achieved immunity against a certain disease. So for example, with COVID-19, it will be a situation where most of the US population, we're estimating about 70 to 80% have some kind of immunity to COVID-19. So as we know, coronaviruses are highly transmissible. Flu is one of the coronaviruses. It's very easy to get passed on from person to person. And so in order to break that transmission, people will either have to get vaccinated or have some kind of immunity from having had the disease before. And so the situation right now is we don't have enough people, not enough people have acquired immunity to the disease. So we're very, very far from that 70% threshold. And a lot of epidemiological experts don't think that it is wise to rely on that metric because that means we expect a whole lot more people to get sick. And so the alternative is to have a vaccine, which is why the pharmaceutical companies are racing, against the clock to try to see if we're able to get a vaccine. The challenge with that herd immunity from having had the disease is there's some studies going on right now that show that people could possibly be reinfected. So there's a study from Hong Kong where they're currently just doing, and from Kenya as well, where there's a constant study where they're trying to see if it is indeed possible that we have some kind of a long-lasting immunity to the disease. So we don't have those answers right now. What we do see is we've seen a few cases where people could have been reinfected, And so that means that if we choose the option A, where we want a whole lot of people to have been exposed to the disease and then build antibodies, it might not protect us if indeed a person can be reinfected. And so, so that's what herd immunity is. In public health, that's one way in which we've protected populations. We do have herd immunity against diseases like polio, smallpox. We did have some of it against measles until recently. So when a whole lot of the population has the vaccine or has some kind of immunity, then we protect, we can assume that we break the cycle of disease and transmission, and so therefore we protect each other, especially our most vulnerable populations.
Questions, observations?
Yeah, I was going to add to that, but I could stop here for questions.
I heard a discussion of this on television, which it basically said a lot of what you just said. What it pointed out was that even if it were 65% immunity, not 70, which is what most epidemiologists think is best, 65% of the United States population is a heck of a lot of people. And the death rate at present time from people who get the disease would be about 6 million dead from herd immunity. And even if it were much lower than that, it would be like 2 million people we're talking about. So relying on herd mentality means killing 2 million to 6 million people. So that's what's wrong with it, basically. Certainly if it's me, that's one of the 2 million. So anyway.
Okay. Yeah, Miss Tolu.
Yes, sir.
Yes, do you have a response?
No, that is certainly true. And I think to also rely on that metric means that we're going to have to wait for a long time. Because when we look historically to diseases, herd immunity is not built in 1 year or 2 years or 5 years. Sometimes it takes populations almost 20 years. Some countries, I think it was India recently, that finally had herd immunity to polio. So it does take such a long time to acquire herd immunity. And so given that situation, based on what the gentleman just said, for a long-term perspective, if this wasn't such a deadly situation, that would be an option. But for right now, I think that the straits are too dire for us to rely on that, on achieving herd immunity. And so I think the vaccines would be the best way to go, even though we've heard and we've seen the propaganda against vaccinations, and especially in this case with COVID-19. So I think us in the public health community have our work set out for us to continue to have messages that target groups where such propaganda is gaining a lot of traction. We saw that before COVID-19. We started to see younger and younger people not believing the vaccines, and some religious organizations. And so to then have COVID-19 and all the propaganda that surrounds it, even having a vaccine might not immediately protect us, except we're somehow able to break that transmission of the propaganda against the vaccine. But it will certainly be a better option than where we are right now, where we're still in the race, and we're still in the running, and there's no solution. So the good thing though is, so far in the United States, we haven't seen reinfection, but we also haven't had the situation for so long. So by the fall, if things, as you know, we're starting to see a steady decline in Texas. We hope that things can remain that way. And so if indeed that decline goes on into the fall and we are not seeing reinfections from people who already got infected, then that will be an amazing story for us in the United States, and I think across the world as well. So in cases where people, like I said, there's a study in Kenya and in Hong Kong as well, where people have said there might be a possibility for infection. It's a few cases. It's not a scenario where everyone who's been exposed to the virus is getting infected again. So from a public health standpoint, that would be our best bet if reinfection is not possible. So that means there's some kind of antibody production happening that could protect some of us, especially the most vulnerable who already have been infected, from being reinfected again. Because the effects of the virus, even after people recover, continue to linger for many months after people have returned to work or returned to their normal lives. So it'll be best case scenario for those people to be protected from infection again. So that's where we are right now. It's very early in the game. We're continuing to look at the data. And because this is happening so quickly, you have the same people responding, having to look at the data as well. So if things continue to decline, that will be an amazing opportunity for us in epidemiology to then have some time to throw all our focus into evaluating the data that we have received.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it true that infections are going down in Texas? And is that correlated with the fact that, or apparently the reporting that testing has also decreased? I mean, do we really know if infections are going down if testing centers are not being utilized as much as they?
So great question. It is true that infections are reducing. So, I'm on the forefront, and I can tell you from the last couple of weeks, we've seen a steady reduction in new infections.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is good for the burden of disease. It means that not as many people within your population will have new infections. So we like that. As far as testing, we certainly have more opportunities for testing than we had obviously in March or in April or May. It might be that people are getting more comfortable, and so people are not as willing to test. Some of the guidelines have also changed, where you don't have to be tested if you have been exposed, which is obviously very strange. There is some issues with that, but at least from the Houston Health Department standpoint, we continue to encourage testing. We continue to push for testing. There's free testing sites across the city. Results are coming back in 48 hours on average. In some cases within 24 hours. So we don't know that the rates of new infections and indication that people are not testing as much. I don't think that there's a strong correlation there, but we know for sure that really people are not testing as much and that there are not as many infections. Now, within certain populations, like our nursing homes, our most vulnerable populations, we are testing every week. In some cases, they are mandated to test all of those, all the staff working in those nursing homes and elderly populations every week. And we are not seeing as many new infections as we were seeing some months ago. So that is promising, but it's too early to say anything for right now. Yes, ma'am.
So, folks, allow me to interrupt. Ms. Tolu, I want to thank you for that sage presentation. We might have to do a part 2. I want to, just give you a special shout out because I know that you had one or multiple kids at a swimming training this morning. And so I know children are the reward of life, and we have to take a break to take care of them. And so, but I'm glad that you could spend a few moments with us, and do not be surprised if we need you to expand on some of the things that you talked about. When you just mentioned nursing homes. My sister-in-law is in a nursing home. Before we found out the extent of the problem, 20 people were already dead. But at any rate, thanks again. I want to make sure that we get to our presentation with James Lee on these conspiracy theories, especially QAnon, but there are a lot more out there. I found out this morning that LeBron James has been deemed leading the NBA through his ceremony of throwing up the talcum dust. That's an Illuminati ceremony, and so he is the Illuminati leader of the NBA. So these conspiracy theories are just running amok. So I want to get to James Lee. You're next. So we're going to extend the remainder of the...
Omawale, excuse me. I'm scheduled for October the 3rd.
Oh, okay. Well, good. I'm sorry. I had you for this morning. But I'm making a note here, October the 3rd, so we have some more questions we could, but what I'm going to suggest is that there are a few other housekeeping issues that we can do. With the remainder of our time this morning, I wanted to let you know that Evan Milligan has joined us. He was part of the staff of Byron Stevenson and worked with the new museum in Birmingham and an integral part of the Innocence Project in its formation. And he's also the child of Bill Milligan and Imani Milligan, whom we know well. And he is one of the, let's say, tallest trees and the brightest lights that we have going forward. So I'm going to conclude on that section unless somebody just wrote, does Texas still exclude results and official reports from quick tests, which has become more popular here? Does that affect the trends?
Yeah, I was just responding in the chat box. So yes, Texas is still excluding those numbers because those tests are considered antigen tests and they are not the gold standard tests which we use, PCR tests. And so the reason for that is we're calling those test results probable cases because they do not show that infection is ongoing. All they are saying is that we recognize that this person has been exposed to a coronavirus, and there are 7 coronaviruses. So it's not very accurate to say that just because that's the antigen test picks up a coronavirus to say that it's COVID-19. So in Texas, we're reporting those cases as probable cases, but not confirmed cases. So once a person has a positive antigen test, the next step is to then have them do a PCR to confirm if it is a positive COVID-19 case. And if it is, then that number goes into the count. And if it comes back negative, and we've seen a lot of that, then that number is excluded from the count. So to your point, Texas is not including the results from the quick antigen testing in its count, except those results have been confirmed with a PCR test. Is that helpful, Ms. Shara?
Yes, I just wondered, since more people are now taking that test, you know, it's good to know that Texas doesn't count them if they take another test, but it just seems to kind of, you know, muddy the water.
No, I agree, especially because CMS and some other, from the national standpoint, it is encouraged to use those results because, you know, that's the faster, you know, some people have turnarounds in 15 minutes. So it makes sense in some way to include it, but the challenge with that is it's not going to give us a true sense of the picture. It could really just, I think, increase the numbers, and those may not be true numbers. So to your point, I think we could, but then there should be like a different set of maybe data analysts then reviewing that data to ensure that we're not counting just bogus, because the flu season is coming up and those tests will pick up the flu because they're coronaviruses. And so we're going to continue to report these high numbers when in fact it's not COVID-19, it's just the coronavirus. So I think that in public health, what we might need to do is then talk to people about the differences between these tests, because a lot of pharmaceuticals and labs are making a lot of money from antigen testing, right? People will rather go, if I know that I can get a result in 15 minutes, why go to a free City of Houston testing when I can't find out until the next 2 to 3 days? So I don't know that we have done a good job just educating people about the difference between both tests. Or the next steps after a person gets a positive antigen test, as an example. But to your second point, are we then missing out some of those numbers because they're not being reported, right? Because if it isn't true that an antigen test is picking up a true COVID-19 test and we're not counting that, we're only counting that as probable, then are we reporting wrong numbers because we're seeing this lower infection rates since we're not reporting the positive test from antigen tests? So it is an interesting question. As you know, there's a very thin line between some of the work we're doing in public health and governance and who's making decisions and things like that. So it's an interesting time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I also have a question that's related to the flu. Is there any hope that the flu vaccine, which I got because I don't like getting the flu, is also going to help me with, or anybody else who gets the vaccine with COVID? Is that something that we can honestly say to people, or it's just my fantasy?
A very good question. We want people to continue to get the flu vaccine because we do know that it offers some protection against coronaviruses. And the symptoms are very similar, right? So if you are protected against the flu, we cannot say for sure that you're going to be protected against COVID-19, but what we know is that the severity, if you then contact COVID-19, could be severely reduced. The severity of that illness or that disease for you could be severely reduced.
Okay.
To push the flu vaccines, especially for vulnerable populations. It is one of the 7 coronaviruses, so you're getting some protection. But unfortunately, in science, one vaccine does not solve all of the problems. So we cannot say right now that it's going to protect you from COVID-19, but we do recommend highly that it's certainly better than not taking the flu vaccine at all. So thank you for taking the vaccine. I got my kids to take theirs yesterday as well.
Thank you for the answer.
You're welcome, sir.
I have a question. I've read that certainly nursing homes have been hard hit nationwide and probably in Texas too. And I also read that healthcare workers have been hard hit. And what I'm wondering is, do you have any ideas about percentages among different demographic groups? Can you spout them off, or they
There is some muffling at the end, so I don't know if I got the end of your question. Could you repeat the question again, please?
I'm wondering if basically risk is different in different populations, and it's apparently very high among healthcare workers and very high among nursing home patients and nursing home staff. And what I'm wondering is, can you elaborate on that or other categories, seniors, children, different ethnicities, whatever?
Yes, very good question. So nursing homes have been hit across the world. It wasn't just the United States, we looked at Sweden, Finland. So a lot of nursing homes have really taken the hit. But you also, as we look at our population, our seniors, our citizens in our nursing homes are the most vulnerable. Most of those folks are already sick, and for the most part already have other comorbidities. They have had other diseases, and so they were just predominantly exposed to COVID-19. And as we went into those nursing homes, we started to see that just the way that a nursing home is set up, some of them are set up as hostels, right? Like you have, a room, and in some nursing homes, there are 4 adults in that room. And so when a healthcare professional goes in to take care of that person, they're taking care of all 4 people. And so that significantly increases the risk of that healthcare professional getting sick. And so the way that our nursing homes are set up in general, I think just predisposed our elderly citizens to the disease. And so what we started to realize was having some of those places just changing their setup. So what we were doing in public health when we went into an outbreak scenario is that we will cohort the entire facility. So we'll split the facility maybe into 3 sections, have like the COVID or the most at risk, on one end, cohorts like maybe the negative folks on the other end. So we had to really think about the structure and the setup of these nursing homes in the way that we could reduce transmission. But many times it's just one entrance, one exit, and a long corridor. And then you have rooms on the left and on the right. You have ceilings that are not so high. You know, the window, you're not able to air the homes. The windows have been shut for many years. So it was just this kind of things that, you know, just predominantly exposed people who were already vulnerable and were already likely to get sick. And so it was just unfortunate to have all of those things mixed up. But I think that the more that we have understood, the more care workers have, you know, we've steadily, our practice has steadily changed in the last 6 months for the better. And so I'm hoping that the people in nursing homes are more comfortable. The workers in nursing homes are also the least paid. They are the most stressed out, and they are the least paid. And so, you know, at the beginning of this virus, we had people who were just mentally stressed out and were earning, in some cases, $10 an hour, $12 an hour. And so when we look at studies, when you compare, you know, just work versus wages, the imbalance, it was just an unfair imbalance, and we're expecting these people to continue to go in and give their best in the middle of this crisis. Because a lot of those homes are also for profit, there was no, some of those healthcare workers don't have insurance. So if peradventure they had been exposed before coming to work, many of them were still coming to work because there was no protection for them, right? So there are a lot of factors as we continue to look at our healthcare system that continue to drive just this high numbers of cases in already vulnerable populations. So we know that CMS is collecting a lot of this data. You know, they've spent a lot of money in the last months providing kits and testing and support and training and all that for nursing homes. So we're really hoping that this translates into just overall improvement in our healthcare system. But unfortunately, that's just a population that we hadn't paid a lot of attention to. And, you know, it's business. A lot of these places are run by corporations. So the government did not have as much oversight, I don't think. But I'm speaking just for myself, not for the government. But there's so many lessons that we've learned. As far as children, at the beginning of the epidemic, we did not think that children were a big driver in the transmission story because mortality was very low and morbidity was low as well. But I think that mobility was low because we had those early shutdowns. So kids were not going anywhere, right? Kids were at home, they were not going to school or anything like that. But as places have continued to open, we've seen that that is not the case. Mobility is actually quite high. There's a burden of disease with children. In fact, there was a study, I think it was the Harvard Medical School a couple of weeks ago that did show that kids had a higher rate of infection. So as far as the COVID-19 in the kid's body, right, compared to like a hospitalized adult. So they are a big part of the transmission, but we also know that a lot of them, I mean, they're kids, right? A lot of kids, you know, they are not vulnerable in the sense of expression of disease. So if we tested more children, we would see that many more of those kids would show COVID-19, they've been exposed, but they're not getting sick. So, and that's why as we open schools, there's a big concern for children being drivers because they continue to remain asymptomatic and are not as predisposed to mortality or things like that. So we'll continue to learn more, I think, as places open and as there's more testing and things like that. So children are a big driver in the transmission, but they are less likely to get sick.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir. Just with the first question I had answered regarding the antigen test numbers, I wanted to add that CMS is counting those numbers as far as cases. So if you're looking for data that is encompassing, including like PCR tests and antigen tests and things like that, CMS might be a good place to go because they're counting their antigen tests as cases, not probable cases.
What's that acronym for CMS for? What does it stand for?
I think that's the Center for Medicaid. Let me Google real quick. I don't want to say the wrong thing. CMS is the Centers for, yeah, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
Okay, all right then, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Yes, so Miss Tolu, I almost want to say Dr. Tolu because you talk with such eminence.
Not yet.
Okay. But anyway, you have to take that, Doc. So Doc, here's the question I'm asked, and this is a kind of a pedestrian question that's been on my mind. Is the only entry point for COVID-19 through the respiratory system? Can it enter through the circulatory system? Can it enter through like a blood cut on my skin?
No, sir. It's a respiratory virus, so that at least for right now, as you know, it's science, so we could find out something else tomorrow. But as of today, no, you can't get infected through a cut in your skin, not by swallowing, not for right now, as of today, it is respiratory.
Okay, thank you. And so the shields should be used with mask.
Yes, sir. The shield should be used with masks because I don't know if you've seen some of those examples where someone sneezes out. So assuming you were just wearing a face shield and I was wearing a face shield and I sneezed out and you're right in front of me, the particles, they don't just shoot out like vertically in front of you. You know, you can imagine when a person sneezes, there's a lot of force. So because the face shields have spaces on the side, they are not as protective, and it is possible that things can escape from the side. So we continue to strongly recommend masks, and they have been shown to be effective. In fact, they've been more effective and using UV lights and things like that. So in public health, we continue to recommend masks as one of the foremost strategies that so far we are finding very reliable. Yes.
Okay. We have about 10 minutes. I guess we could entertain one more question, but that would be the last one.
Wally, I have a question, and I'm
Yes,
still
ma'am.
stuck back on herd immunity, okay? It seems like we're ascribing to herd immunity by default because the governor has opened up the state restaurants, 75%, gyms, football games. It seems like we're moving towards being together a whole lot. And I'm thinking about the definition for herd immunity, and it sounds like herd immunity will be facilitated by our actions. Is that right?
Very good question. Yes, we did see the governor's recent announcements, and so we know that places are going to be opening up a whole lot more. When we look at countries like Sweden, so Sweden never shut down its borders. There was, we want herd immunity. That is the only sustainable way that we can protect each other. And so Sweden, back in March and up to date, never really shut down. They thought that if people continue to mingle and, you know, the more and more people got exposed, they thought that at some point they would be able to achieve some kind of a herd immunity. They didn't say that per se, but their strategy was to not shut down, to just organically continue to have people mingle, but to have people take precautions. The numbers, at least in public health, we don't think that, at least as of right now, that was a good strategy because the mortality was still high compared to its Scandinavian neighbors that shut down borders like Finland. But also people have argued that the culture of the people are slightly different. So people are wearing masks, people are social distancing versus our culture here where individuals continue to, you know, have a choice to make whatever decisions that they want to make. And so having said that, we still have to continue to protect our most vulnerable, because you and I may be fine, right, out in public, intermingling and things like that. But our most vulnerable are older citizens, or just people who, you know, have comorbidities, may not be fine. And so, yes, the governor is pushing for, I think, more interactions. And I think the idea behind that is that maybe we can't stay locked in forever. And since the numbers are declining, maybe they think that it is safe to open things up. But we are so far from reaching herd immunity that, you know, as we had talked about earlier, 70% is a long way to go. Community where some communities are maybe more protected than others, but in general, I don't think that the government is saying that that is what they're trying to do. I think that there are many influences on the Texas government, which, you know, obviously I don't know, but we're so far from a scientific standpoint from herd immunity that that will not be a wise thing to rely on right now.
Yeah, I guess so. But like I said by default, we're not doing anything.
We hope that people continue to wear masks and that we don't get complacent just because everything is open, and that there is some permission from the top to kind of go out there and return to normal. Because we just don't know, right? We haven't had this in the fall yet. We don't know what it's going to look like. We're going to be dealing with flu cases come October. Schools are opening. So there's just a lot of question marks that it is too early to say for sure that this is a great decision or not. We really just don't know.
Right.
But I think our best bet is to continue to do what we know works. So to continue to encourage masks and social distancing and hand washing and things like that as much as we can. And the numbers will tell as we go into the flu season and into the fall. But I think that language of herd immunity we're just very far off that. That is not even something that we're very close to achieving.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very sage question that you asked. Ms. Stevens, makes me think that you have a medical background.
No, I'm Wally, just a teacher in the classroom. That's all.
All right. All right.
That's one of the group of people that I'm going to get out to vote. I'm president of a Retired Teachers Association.
Oh,
and
okay.
statewide, we have almost 100. We almost have 100,000 retired teachers statewide. That's the Texas Retired Teachers Association, TRTA.
Well, look, that's wonderful to hear. And by the way, I have a friend in Dallas, Texas, that's a retired principal. And what he does is that he try to make masks available through 3M and some other companies for affordable for teachers in inner city communities. So if you need his information, you let me know. Okay. Well, look, we're going to move on, Ms. Brenda.
Yeah, I sure will, because I will get that out.
Thank you. So, Ms. Tolu.
Yes.
That was the bomb.
Yes, it was. Thank you very much.
That was the bomb.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very honored. Thank you so much. Very honored to share on this platform. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me, you know, in terms of this big evolution of the beloved, the emergence of the beloved community, I think that this is some counsel against us going into our silos, because I really met Ms. Tolu just through a saying hello and then exploring some common affinities. So I want us to be real intentional about not being too gun shy and actually take a chance on meeting new people. I know that we suspect about people not having very good interpersonal skills, especially with new people, but there can be some dividends that you can get out of this. If you notice the agenda, I'm not looking at it now, Ms. Cassie is gonna bring it back up, but one of the things I wanted to say with the agenda, if you notice on the agenda, after we dealt with open discussion and conspiracy theory, we came down to study groups. So this is basically a result of having some side piece conversations with each of you or with many of you. And this is more or less aspirational. If we decided to go forward from an aspirational standpoint, as to whether or not these would be the type of burning issues that we would have to have a perspective on, or we would have to have good content that we could present and have strong talking points that we could present to the American people. And of course, we're going to have a fuller discussion after the November election, but I wanted to get your ideas on whether or not something else should be of 6 things that we need to think about.
Wally, I'd like to make a suggestion.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is a question of low-income housing.
Okay.
Housing.
I got it, Wendy. That'd be very good. And so we do have a member, Daniel Bustamante, who is the chairperson of the Greater Houston Housing Committee. And so Daniel will be able to bring us the content, a lot of the content and information, and then he's associated with the Texas housing groups in Austin who lobby for public policy in the area of housing. So we do have a contact. I did make a note, and I thank you for mentioning that. Does anybody have anything else?
I wanted to mention that I've been surprised that I haven't heard more so far about the necessity for drastic change on the level of the original New Deal, because I think personally that the economic situation is really bad right now and is going to get worse if nothing is done in the way of a stimulus until a new president takes office, which I think there's a good chance that's what's going to happen. And by that time, I think the economy is going to be in ruins and going to need some drastic different methods applied to it than have been. So I'm wondering if there's, it's not like I'm prepared to tell you what we should do about this, but I'm thinking it's something we need to consider.
Yeah. So Nancy, I'm going to pair that or make it a subset of the climate change discussion, even though it is, you know, the climate change and is not as comprehensive, maybe might be more comprehensive than the Green New Deal, but I can see it existing as a special category that we need to talk about. I wanted you to know that the Urban League, in association with some other groups, they have presented what they call a Marshall Plan, which speaks to some aspects of the Green New Deal in terms of jobs and the importance of jobs for the new emerging economy. But anyway, you and I can talk privately about that, but I'm in agreement with you that the Green New Deal needs to be in these points that we would consider in regard to going forward. Does anybody have anything else?
Yeah, I do. I have I'd still be interested in the question of how do we bring together what I will broadly describe as our generation with what I will broadly describe as my kids' generation, to see if there's a synergy. You know, when I heard of Justice Ginsburg's death last night, what I was reminded of was Joe Hill, and the notion of organizing is still prominent in my perspective on where we got to be going forward. And I don't know if we have anything to offer at this point or not, but I'd be interested to see. It certainly would be fun.
Yeah.
So I'd see some kind of cross-generational work that may be not issue specific, might be worth looking at.
So David, if you would stay tuned and possibly be part of the study group that is going to be emerging, especially when we start talking about defining our base and building through organizational strategy and tactics. One of the things that we're going to talk about is cross-cutting strategies that might run from 20 to 55 or 20 to 85. What are the cross-cutting strategies that can weld all of these groups involved in a common thrust? So your comments are very, very forward thinking, and they are in sync with what some of us are thinking. So what I'm making an obligation to you is that going forward, that we will be thinking about some cross-cutting strategies if we decide to keep this group together and we get a little bit more stability. We will be talking about cross-cutting strategies and this intergenerational approach.
That I would like that. I guess the reason that I say that is, and this I'm sure is consistent with what you just were saying. I hope it's consistent anyway. If we look at each of the issues on your list, there are already some fairly well-organized groups. I could have added immigration, but there's also immigration groups. They're people who are addressing these issues, and the idea that the 12 to 30 of us are going to by ourselves materially add to any one of those groups is relatively small. But it may be that if we take, just to pick on you, Omawali, somewhere between a half and 3/4 of a century of experience and find a way to transfer that experience, or at least the happy parts of that experience, to some younger folks, there may be some things that can be offered that are worthwhile for each of these issues. But again, the idea that 30 of us are going to take on police reform, which is an issue I've been involved with as a lawyer all my life, or low-income housing, and doing some work on that. The 30 of us I don't think are going to be the vanguard. And I'm sort of wondering, how do we find a way to help others going forward? That's why I asked that question. I'm very glad that you're committing to that.
And that's a good question. And I'm gonna give you the Elizabeth Warren answer for that.
Yeah.
We have a plan.
Excellent.
Yeah. So anyway, and I'm gonna try to bring
and with all honesty, I know Elizabeth Warren, and you know Elizabeth Warren, and that's a compliment in this particular case.
All right. Yeah. So, as a matter of fact, when we referred to her, and I was talking to young people about her.
I do like Elizabeth.
I do too. Is that,
as you say,
when people say, well, who is that? We said, that's the we have a plan lady. We don't have a caller by her name.
Yeah.
But at any rate, David, I'm going to send you some information, because on this plan for that, we have a police reform youth group, and we're having a town hall on September the 30th with the assistant chiefs of HPD, where they're gonna get a chance to ventilate about policing and what they think of the reform. So in other words, I'm
That
saying,
would be excellent. I would love that.
no, I'm gonna send you that, and so you'll be welcome to be on with that. Let me make it, but I'm glad that we having this kind of discussion, because we finding out where our publics are, where our base is, and how we are connected to that base. Because it say if we end up with 30 or we end up with 25, we're only going to be able to make things happen through our networks. And some of these things can only happen with 3 to 5 years or 2 to 3 years of community organizing. But there are other people already organizing in these areas. So people, I wanted to stay as close to the contracted time as possible, because I know that a lot of you all have a lot to do on Saturday. Carissa Arthur just joined us. I don't know if that's a lady or a man.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Miss Arthur. Is that
Yes,
Miss
hi.
Arthur?
Yes, Miss.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. You know, so I had to call a friend of mine. She, I had met her actually at work, and she sent me an email, and she put on the email pronouns, she, her, or hers. And so I can't tell you what I said. It wasn't what the hell is that? It was something else. So, but look, I'm glad that your voice.
You really need to be with some young people, Omawali. That's all I'm going to say to you, man. You know, you're my good friend, and you need to be with some young people.
Yeah. But I tell you what, I don't know how many questions or more questions that I can entertain of being God. If you mention gender, that might turn me off from the very beginning.
That's why you need to be with some young people.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. But no, Miss Arthur, I'm glad to have you. You came. Anything that comes from Cassie is highly recommended. So we want to thank you. Hope that you'll continue to join us. If anybody has a fresh issue that we need to address, I'm looking at a calendar. We won't be back together to the 3rd. And of course, the core presentation is going to be on this conspiracy, how it is gaining popularity in the mainstream of America. James Lee will be handling that next week. Does anybody see anything that we need to review, especially as we move toward the election? You might want to go back through some of the notes, because it has been suggested that we have some resources like Act Blue, which will provide transportation to folk. So we need to make sure that we have all of our resource bases in operation, and we know how to get this information to people so that we don't miss one voter. And I'm always reminded that John Kennedy won 1960 by 1 vote per precinct. That was 100,000 for the entire country nationwide. But we're a long way from 1960, as you know.
Yeah, we probably lost by 1 vote per precinct the last time.
Oh, something like that, yeah.
Al Gore lost by 1 vote in the Supreme Court.
Exactly.
Wow.
Boy, was that the Hanging Chad's election?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Some folk called me last night, and they were asking me about this National Guard mobilization for the elections. Evidently, we've been infiltrated by this Trojan horse force that going to take over the polling places, and there's going to be this National Guard display. But I am reminded that in that Al Gore election, that in Florida, on the basis that many Black people had warrants out for them, they made sure that the police cars were prominent at all of the polling places to deter Black people from going to the polls to vote. But that's all part of Black life in America, so we don't need to we don't need to stop on that. Let's keep the communication going on. If you want to invite new people, you pretty much know what we're trying to do in terms of this beloved community. We're building this beloved community, which is a multiracial democracy. You're welcome to invite new people. So I'm getting ready to get out. We're going to get a one-word.
Do you want a few words on the tropical storm?
Yes, sir. I forgot about that. But thank you for that sage report last time.
Well, I'll give you the latest updates from Harris County Flood Management, which is, I think, the best interpretation of what we're likely to see. Basically, as of this morning, the best guess is that this tropical storm Beta, which is now out in the Gulf, will be a tropical storm through about, looks like sometime Sunday, and then it's going to become a hurricane, category 1. Will get quite near to Corpus Christi, and then it's going to make a right turn and go right along the Texas coast all the way to Louisiana. Which is pretty much what Harvey did, by the way. But so that I'm looking at maps right now, and what they're saying here is the most likely time for tropical storm
Service.
Pardon?
It's a good service. Who are you talking to?
Cut your mute down, David. Turn your mute on.
Are you in this?
So anyway, the most likely time for Harris County to get tropical storm force winds are about 8 p.m. Sunday, tomorrow. And that's 39 miles per hour or less. And there's going to be about a 2 to 4 foot storm surge in Galveston Bay. And basically about 7 a.m. Wednesday is when this thing's supposed to go right through Galveston Bay and will be very close to us. And that's just the most probable course. But by 7 a.m. Wednesday morning, the probability for the track goes everywhere from, I don't know, quite a ways in the Gulf all the way to North Texas. So they don't actually know where this thing's going to go. And it could, for example, hit Austin at this point. But their best likely track at the moment is right along the Texas coast, right across the Bolivar Peninsula. And they're estimating assuming that it goes on that track, they're assuming that we will get 4 to 6 inches south of I-10, and coast will get 8 to 12 inches of rain, which probably means that that if it changes and goes through, say, right through Houston, that means we'll get 8 to 12 inches of rain, probably Tuesday or Wednesday. And I would say this is very late for something like this to happen here. I've never really seen anything much after the 15th of September. So that's the latest one on that. And there's they're figuring no more than 12 inches of rain wherever it is the worst at the moment. But everybody should pay a lot of attention to this thing, because some of the models yesterday night said it could get as high as a Category 2 hurricane. Nothing higher than that, but still Category 2 is devastating. So keep an eye on this thing. It's potentially quite dangerous. And welcome to climate change, folks.
Yeah, so Bob, you're not advising any of us to prepare an exit strategy, are you?
No, what they're suggesting is, let's see what it said here. I saw something, okay, it's gotta be the other one, just a minute. There's a voluntary evacuation suggested at this time for Western Galveston Island and Bolivar Peninsula. But that's assuming the track basically runs where they're suggesting, and it's still quite a few days off. These things are really not fairly certain until 48 hours before impact. And so 5 day stuff is almost always wrong in some way or another.
Okay.
Anyway, but no, evacuation, the way they talk about evacuation is you evacuate from water and shelter from wind. That's the basic rule. If you think you could likely get flooded out, you need to get out of there because you could drown. But if unless you were subject to storm surge from Galveston Bay, you shouldn't, or a flood from a nearby bayou, basically you shouldn't have that problem. The wind is the problem, and it doesn't sound like we are going to possibly at most get 110-mile-an-hour winds, and probably not even hurricane force is most likely. Most likely we'll see 30-mile-an-hour winds or something like that. But across Harris County, wind will likely be in the 25 to 35-mile-per-hour range on Monday, and possibly 40 to 50-mile-an-hour winds on Tuesday into Wednesday, with higher gusts, especially near Galveston Bay more. So that's the latest thing. This is Saturday. I send out bulletins at this time to a wide range of green businesses and nonprofits that do work outside. And I think I put Omawali on the list, and maybe I put Cassie or somebody on the list, but I could put others, or I could just forward it and you could re-forward. I could send it to Cassie and she could send it out if she feels important.
Yeah, if you send it to me, I'll send it to everybody else. I don't want to put any more
just make your own decision. I don't like creating a lot of email and people's things, so I only send these things out when it's early warning. Everybody can find their own weather apps, and the National Weather Service, will and National Hurricane Center both have good information on it. What I do is I digest a whole lot of stuff and then warn people 5 to 7 days ahead of time is what I mainly do. 2 days ahead of time, they can just read the stuff themselves. But it's more or less what Harris County Flood Management does is it's waking up emergency workers, city and county officials and things like that, because they may have to cancel, they may need to get their staff and police and fire and everything ready.
Yeah.
So that's what it is.
Well, your last missive that you fired out related to the last storm, it was very much right on time and very comforting. But if you hit me, I'll hit everybody else. And we can't wait until you give your exposition on the where you talk about wildfires and hurricanes and all of that in one swoop. But at any rate,
I can wait. I don't need any wildfires.
Okay, all right.
My brother's got wildfires in Oakland. We don't need that. Just
Okay.
I still have pictures of the 2011 Bastrop fire. And
yeah, that we don't need that.
they told the Houston Arboretum, the city fire department, that they couldn't defend the Arboretum if it caught fire.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, this climate change discussion is going to be paramount with us. Before we get off the phone, I wanted to say to David, I know that we haven't had a chance to share with you collectively, but we know that your family has been dealing with some grief issues related to a death in your family. But now that you become part of this extended family, we all want you to know that we share your pain and we share your suffering, and you will get through this.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, look, unless somebody has anything that's groundbreaking or overwhelming, hopefully you got something that's underwhelming. So we're going to start with Ms. Carter and Angela, and let her give us a one word or one phrase checkout, and we'll see each other on October 3rd.
One word.
Or one, it can be a phrase.
Okay.
Or a poem or an essay. Okay.
Just looking for a peaceful week.
Oh.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Randall, Professor?
A friend's baby was born yesterday.
Thank you. Okay. David?
Organize.
Organize. Miss Wendry?
Retain some of Ruth Ginsburg's values.
Oh, I love that. Yes. Miss Edwards?
Nervous.
Okay, all right. Okay. Okay, Charlotte?
In the words of John Lewis, good trouble.
Oh, I like that.
Very
Okay.
good.
And by the way, I think CNN has a John Lewis special on Sunday night.
Yeah.
Okay, James Lee?
I just implore everyone to stay safe. These are terrible times.
Yeah. And by the way, I've been watching that disfigured finger that you have on the camera. You need to get that fixed. Okay, Miss Stevens.
Yes, just saluting the notorious RBG. She helped me out with the Lily Ledbetter decision.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I do. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and matter of fact, you can explain that to everybody next time we're on the line.
Oh, absolutely.
Lily Ledbetter. Yeah.
And I'll tell you my situation at that time.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Gary?
Transformation. I think it's possible.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Tolu?
When
Okay. You said when? When?
No, wear a mask.
Okay, I got you. Okay, good. Wear a mask. Guess the mask is the new vaccine, huh? Okay. Miss Arthur?
Knowledge is power.
Thank you. And my comment would be what Mahalia Jackson said, for every drop of rain, a flower grows. God bless. We'll see you on the next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.